you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
All righty. Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Counter-Racist Culture with Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, as usual, you will dial 516-453-9921. And when you do that and you get on, please, ma'am, please, sir, give your name to the call screener. That way I can properly introduce you. That's the best way to get in contact with the show and have your content read. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. Now, I cannot guarantee that your Gmail will be read today, and it may not be read because I'm looking at, there's so many of them come in that sometimes they drop off, and there's nothing that I could do about that. But we answer the calls first, and then we go to the Gmails, and I try to enter the Gmails as I can. So please, ma'am, please, sir, keep that in mind, and I would like to ask that you not write me a novel because I can only read so much. That's why it's better if you call in. That way you can directly ask Mr. Fuller your questions. Okay, our usual people are online, so let's start off with today's show. By the way, chat room is open. Everything is working. Books are all in, and we'll proceed with the show. Mr. Fuller, this comes from the concept of South Africa. Brother Sapilo writes this. I guess you could say it's VGQ. Dear Mr. Neely Fuller, a billionaire from the concept of United States of America is in South Africa running vaccine test on black people of this country. We have seen the USA, Spain, and Italy be the epicenter of COVID-19. I personally haven't observed any COVID illnesses, but of late, there's been smog all over the city. They're poisoning our air during the viral pandemic, they being the masters of the system of white supremacy. I wrote to you about the balance of forces last year, but it was never read. This is the silent war. You're correct, Mr. Fuller, when you said if racists desire to kill us, they would. I'm horrified at what's happening. As I write to you, our electricity is off. I have a headache and nausea from the fumes. I don't have a question for you right now, Mr. Fuller. I just thought I'd share what is happening in the southern tip of Africa. We found oil in our sea not too long ago, and the racists are interested in it. Racists are fighting against us, expropriating land. Pompey of the United States is involved. I also saw Mr. Fuller this week on the, I think it was the Black News Channel, that there's been an outbreak in Johannesburg, South Africa, where they have done what a lot of the suspected race soldiers in the police forces of the United States have done. They killed an unarmed black man in the same manner that you see all over this concept called the United States. What is your view on that, Mr. Fuller?
On the killings?
That and also
on everything that's been said?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just business as usual. The white supremacists operate basically the same way all over the world, and it's logical that they would, simply because they have found a formula, a code for things that work. That's what all codes are about. I mean, when they're established, every time you do it, it works. And so if you can work with people's minds and get them to do the things that you want done, and you try that, different ways of doing that, and to dominate and control people, if that's your purpose, then you follow that formula. And if you want to work with their bodies and weaken their bodies and their minds, you find out formulas for doing that. You poison the air, you poison the water, you poison their body systems, anything that will work on their body systems where they become dependent on you being the rescuer. They give you diseases, etc., and you don't know what to do about them except to suffer until the people who gave you the disease has figured out how to cure the disease, so they come along and cure it, and then you are beholden to them, and you're helpless without them. So one thing that you do if you're going to dominate people over a long period of time, you figure out ways to make them helpless. So everything that I heard from the person who just submitted this information just a few minutes ago, is the usual pattern of the system of white supremacy. Just figure out how to dominate and mistreat people in order to gain the things that all people want: fun, glory, and material comfort. The white supremacists are no exceptions to that. All people and all creatures want those three things out of their existence: fun, glory, and material comfort. Fun means you're happy. You find something to make you happy. You go and adopt a dog, or you go to a tennis game, and so you get thrills and happiness and whatnot. It's the way you entertain your mind and sometimes your body. And the glory is you are looked up to. You're well thought of. Or even if people have disdain for you, they still have to run to you. And that's glory. You know, people say that, hey, I'm looking for glory. I'm going to the battlefield so that if I win the battle, everybody will just run to me and say, ooh, I mean, how fascinating, how great you are. See, everybody wants that. Squirrels want that. Bees want that. They want glory. And, of course, you want material comfort. You don't want to be in pain. You want to always be comfortable. And as comfortable as you can possibly be, as best you can possibly be. So the white supremacists figured out a formula for making themselves have fun, have glory, and have comfort by dominating and mistreating people of color. That's all it is. It's just that simple. It's a terrible way to get fun, glory, and material comfort. A system of justice would be much better, treating people correctly in all areas of activity, rather than getting your fun and glory and material comfort out of mistreating people, which is what the white supremacists have become masters at doing.
Yes, sir. All righty. Let's continue on here. Okay. This is from Astroastrology. It says, Mr. Fuller, I've often heard you say that we need a code. We already have one. You wrote it. The problem is that most people who read it still don't do it. How can a code possibly help us when so few of us are actually willing to execute it? We do plenty of complaining, and then when someone gives us a solution, we still don't have any desire to actually carry it out. Thank you.
Yes, and I understand that because it's a thing called habit. Once people become well-groomed into their habits, their comings and goings, the things that make them laugh, the things that make them cry, the things that make them thrill, all the different emotions. Once people get control of your emotions, like the white supremacists have gotten control of black people's emotions, then they can just jerk them around forever. And how does this happen? You start early. You catch people at an early age if you want to send them in a certain direction. And it's even when they hear something different and may be a little strange to them, and even if they, like you might give an example of a certain food that people are used to eating. They eat and eat and eat, and they get in the habit of eating that particular food. So when someone comes along and say, that stuff that you're eating, that's made out of paper. That's not real food. And they say, well, this is what I've always eaten. I mean, this is what I've always had for breakfast. I mean, my family is all going way back, generations. That's what we do. Say, yes, but it's not healthy. Now, I have something here that's kind of new, but it's healthy. It'll make you strong. It'll make your mind strong. It'll make your body strong. And just a little of it will go a long ways. And it's inexpensive. And you tell the person that. And they sample it. They say, yeah, that's kind of nice. I mean, that's not bad, you know. But they still have that yearning to eat that paper. Why? Because that's what they have been doing, habit. So you just have to keep at it. The solution for that is you just keep at it. You just keep showing the person the new food and saying, just sample a little bit more of it this time. You had a spoonful or two the first time. Well, see if you can eat a half a cup, and then you go that way. It's I just gave the food example because that's one that everybody eats. And people are familiar with that. And everybody can think of some food that they have been eating for years. I think that applies to everybody. And they just don't want to turn loose to it, even though it may be harming them. It's like smoking. It's like doing anything that's a habit.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. All righty. Continuing on. Phone lines are open. 516-453-9921. If you have a question for Mr. Fuller, be sure that you press the number 1 button and you'll go to the top of the line. This comes from Fareed. Says this, first of all, good morning, Mr. Fuller. I do appreciate the work that you do. I have a request, if possible, Mr. Fuller. Could you comment on the phrase, talking is not one of our 5 senses, and everything we say is nonsense. My mother once told me, green things grow and ripe things rot. Thank you for taking my question and forever a student.
Well, I thank her for her thanks. But was there a question there?
The request is, could you comment on the phrase, talking is not one of our 5 senses, and everything we say is nonsense.
Talking is not one of our
5 senses.
5 senses. I don't remember saying that. I don't know where that came from. Somebody have to explain to me what that means. And the other part was what?
The other part is, and everything we say is nonsense.
Oh, I haven't said that either. I mean, everything that a person says is nonsense. Everybody makes sense about something. But you want to try to make sense about everything. That should be the goal. Anytime we talk, anytime any person talks, anywhere on the planet, what you say should have a constructive effect. That's the goal. Because when you're talking for a reason. And we should try to perfect that. Every person on the planet, they try to shape everything that we say. Think about it before we speak. Thought, speech, then action. And speech is a form of action. So when you get to the speech part, try to say, now this thing that I'm going to say, I want it to have a constructive effect, not a non-constructive effect. because everything is in those two categories. Every move that we make, from the time we get up in the morning, as an illustration, to the time we lie down and go to sleep. Every move that you make and everything that you say is going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. In order to be a quality person, you should try to perfect the science of every move that you make, and everything that you do or say is going to have a constructive effect, never a non-constructive effect. Just that simple formula. That's pure code.
Okay. All right, moving along. Gigi writes this. Dear Mr. Fuller, I hope that you're well as you receive this mail. Mr. Fuller has made it clear that there are only two categories of persons when it comes to color classification, and that is white and non-white. During apartheid years in South Africa, Chinese people were given honorary white status by the ruling global white supremacist government. Please, Mr. Fuller, can you explain into which category this may fall as regards to the two categories? Thank you, Gigi.
Well, there's three categories, actually, according to the code book that you can get by going to producejustice.com. It's just three, because this racial classification thing is going to come up again and again. We've seen some recent reports on that, where a supposedly white lady passed many years for black because it was for her convenience, apparently. I mean, that's strictly anti-code. You can't have confusion in your classifications. And anybody who lends to that type of confusion is a person who is the enemy of justice, period. You can't have confusion. So you have the three categories of white, non-white, and white supremacists. See, and you have to be a white person, classified as white, in order to be a white supremacist. But those are the three categories. I made that distinctive. So it's just not, we already see, and we're very familiar with many, many non-white people looking like white people.
Yes.
But see, it's just being in that skin color category, having a lighter skin, that's white, but you have to be a white supremacist. That's something you have to join. That's a political concept. That's a philosophy. See, so just having white skin, like many black people have white skin. Now, that sounds like a contradiction, but the truth is it's just that way when you start talking about the classifications, because whoever invented this thing called racism, whomever did it to confuse people anyway, because racism is confusing and it doesn't make sense. Nothing about racism makes sense, except it makes sense as a means of mistreating people. That's the vehicle. It's just a means of getting over on people. I mean, by using any means necessary or any means that'll work. And that is found to be work. But it can be very, very, very confusing. But the white supremacists just explain that away simply by saying, well, it's what I choose to do, and I found out that it works, so I'm going to work it. So the people who are most confused about that are the people who are the victims of it.
Okay.
And that's the people who are classified as non-white. But it's just three classifications: white, non-white, and white supremacists. And where somebody who just called in said about the Chinese are called honorary whites. Well, they have done this all since the beginning of white supremacy. The white supremacists have done this because they're the masters of this type of thing. Things are what they say they are. So they can take anybody in their prison system called the system of white supremacy and say, okay, you are going to be my favorite black person. Or they'll say, for the next 5 days, even though you're black, I'm going to designate that for the next 5 days, because it's for my convenience, you're going to be white for the next 5 days. And you say, well, how can I be white and I'm black? You'll be white because I said so with your black self. Now shut up and do what I say for the next 5 days, but you will be classified as white. And everybody will see you that way. Why? Because I say that that's how they're going to see you. And what are they going to do about it? What are your people going to do about it? Nothing. Mm-hmm. You can't do anything about it because I said it. You got to deal with me. Okay? So that's the end of it. And they have done this. I understand it in the place called South Africa, the concept called South Africa.
Yes, sir.
During apartheid, I read this somewhere, if a person came from Japan and stayed there on a passport for a little while as a visitor, they would be honorary white, depending on what they wanted that person to do. Mm-hmm. And that person would have family. That person would be visiting family right there in what is called South Africa. And they're all the same family. They're all the same people. But the people who are permanently there would be classified as non-white. That's how they worked it. I read that somewhere many years ago. I hope I'm not making an error. But I think I read that somewhere, because otherwise, where did I get that from? But I read that actually was the situation. That a lot of people, even though that's your family, living in South Africa, you come to visit them, but for the few days you're going to be there, the few months, you are honorary white. Or if you're on some type of business there, that's the main thing. It was for business purposes. Because white supremacy is a business. And they do anything that's convenient for the business.
Honorary white. Wow. Okay. All righty. Let's see, the next one here. Oh, don't forget now, the number is 516-453-9921. Depress the number 1 button, and you'll go to the top of the line. Bunbo asks you this, Mr. Fuller. He says, please, can you ask Mr. Fuller about instances where something is not true, but not proven false? In other words, there are 3 categories in logic. Something that is not true may not necessarily be proven false. The concepts of, quote, neither, end of quote, both, end of quote, interdeterminable, end of quote, comes to mind. All these may be labeled, quote, not true. False wouldn't be appropriate. So why then does Mr. Fuller maintain that some things are either true or false when it may be true, not true, or false?
I don't understand that.
I didn't either, but I'm just reading it the way that TV
Yes, and I know. The use of the words, I don't understand that combination of words at all. I just don't understand it. I don't understand what's really being said.
Okay,
that's beyond my comprehension. So someone else will have to answer that question. To me, what I put in the code book, what is truth? Truth is that which is. It is what it is. A blade of grass is a blade of grass, regardless of what I call it. And that's true. A blade of grass is not the same thing as a rock. Fire is not the same as water. Truth is that which is. That which is what? That which is whatever it is. So I can call it by another name. I can call fire rock. I can do that. But everybody who is going to listen to it is not going to know what I'm saying unless I explain to them that I am going to call fire rock. I'm not going to call a rock anymore. I'm going to call a rock fire, and I'm going to call a fire rock. But I have to explain that to the person that I'm talking to. Because what are we talking about here? We're just talking about words. But a flower called by another name is still what it is. Truth is that which is. And false is that which isn't. But you'll call it something that it isn't. Call something, it's a matter of what you want, what words you want to choose to do what? Convey an idea in order to reveal what? The truth. Or, depending on your intent, to deceive somebody, and that's what falsehood is about. You're trying to fool somebody. Mm-hmm. And the white supremacists are masters at that. They're masters at fooling people. They switch words around. I mean, they'll make you dizzy in 5 minutes with words.
Okay. All righty. I'll tell you what we're going to do. At this point, let me go ahead and cue up the music here since we're at this point here. Thank you, Warp, and the people who are in the chat room and those who are online. You are listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. And if you would like to make a comment or call in with a question, you can by calling 516-453-9921. Or if you would like, you can also email me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Your best way, though, would be to call in. We do have some lines that are open, so if you wanted to do that, you can do that. When you do that, make sure you press the number 1 button, and you'll go to the top of the line here, and that's good. Okay, let's see here. We're going to go back to the Gmails here while we're waiting on the calls. This comes from Furland. It says this: Mr. Bobby, could you please ask Mr. Fuller whether people who abort their babies should kill themselves also?
No. In fact, people shouldn't abort their babies.
Okay.
That's code. But if you're forced to, by the system is set up, and you make that choice, then that's up to the person in answer to that question. That question has never been asked before. But every question has an answer, and every answer to a question has a correct answer. There's no such thing as an incorrect answer to a question. That's just an incorrect judgment, okay? But there is a correct answer for every question. And the question is, should a baby be aborted according to logic? No, not ever. But in the system of white supremacy, nothing is the way it ought to be. You're not going to get that, so you have chaos in the system of white supremacy. Chaos among whom? Among the victims, which is what the system of white supremacy is designed to do, to guarantee absolute chaos among black people. Black people are supposed to have chaotic minds and do all kind of chaotic deeds, do the most stupid things that you can possibly conceive of doing. That's what the white supremacist system is designed to have non-white people do. And the only time we do anything that's supposed to make, quote, sense is when the white supremacists dictate that we do that. Mm-hmm. And that's all non-white people. That's what the white supremacists do not like to see and will prohibit non-white people from doing anything that is of constructive value. Here again, I'll go back to those two words: constructive, non-constructive. Every move that everybody makes, any time of day or night, anywhere on the planet, is going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect. There's no such thing as in between.
Okay.
And the white supremacists do not want non-white people to ever be constructive about anything in any of the areas of activity, except when they say, all right, it's constructive time for you boys and girls, all right? But I will dictate what the construct will be, and it will be for my benefit, because everything constructive is for my benefit. Everything non-constructive is for your disaster. That's the prescription for the system of white supremacy.
Okay. Mr. Fuller, let me ask you this, if I may. A caller wrote in, and you addressed the issue. It was a couple of callers back about the words neither, both, and interdeterminate, or I think determinable. Speaking about the concept of true and false, and you said that you don't know. Is you don't know also an answer to a question?
Yes, because I'm telling the truth. I don't know. I don't even understand what all of that means, you know. It's never been put to me in that frame of reference. Maybe somebody out there in the audience can figure out what that means. But words are nothing but tools, and you can use words any kind of way. And so I haven't heard those words in that combination before in my entire existence. So the person who uses words is supposed to have the explanation. That's the codified way. Any word that I use, I should be able to explain if I'm using that word or that combination of words. That's the way it works. That's what you call the way language works. That's why a person who speaks in a language that you're not familiar with, you're not familiar with that language. And so you have to ask the person, what do you mean when you say this? What do you mean when you say that? Until they can agree on what words mean.
Okay.
I gave the illustration earlier about rocks and water and fire. Well, fire, in the English language, if you understand English, I immediately know what fire is. But if you say it to me in some tribal language, I won't know what you're talking about. And even in the English language, if you combine a certain set of words a certain way without explaining in detail what each one of those words mean in the context that you're presenting it, there's no way for me to understand what you're saying. It's like I speak to a person in German who's never heard German, and then ask that person, what did I just say? I asked you a question. Now, do you understand my question? And explain, give me the answer to that question in German. I couldn't do it because I don't know what you're saying. I don't speak German. It's just that simple. Words are nothing but tools. Tools for what? Getting a job done. And if you're not getting a job done, then the tools have lost their meaning. The tools are not fashioned to do the job that needs doing. That's all words are good for. They're not good for nothing else. Getting a job done.
Okay. All righty. Let's go to the phone lines in the 803. I believe we're going to go to Wendell. Wendell, let me see if we can get you up here. Okay, Wendell, I think you're on. You're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please, with your question.
Hello there. Mr. Fuller, my question would be, when you say everyone, when you talk about justice, guaranteeing that everyone is not mistreated and those who need the most help get the most constructive help first, is that like a law that you're kind of speaking about that needs to be put in effect for that to actually take place, or each individual person is just something that they need to do?
It's both. A law is what? A law is just something that people do. So when you say do and law, what is doing and what is law. Getting back to that question, what is a word? What is a word for? So if you're talking about that, you're talking about justice. So I made up a definition for it that I think you can measure it. Number one, guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. Now, people usually know when somebody's being mistreated. Babies can sense it. Little children, you can see it in their eyes. You pass around apples to everybody. 10 people there. 10-year-olds. And you give 9 of them an apple. And then the 10th one, you always skip over that 10th one and give the other 9 an apple. And that 10th person, 10 years old or 8 years old or whatever, looks around and says, why is it that the teacher comes down the line, gives everybody an apple, and always I don't get an apple? Now, the person may not say anything and may not understand it, but they see what's going on, and they will interpret that in their minds, that even their young minds, they will say, that looks like mistreatment. It looks like I'm being mistreated. People can sense mistreatment. Animals can sense mistreatment. So it's either you're being treated correctly or you're not. So in justice, you got the elements of guaranteeing that no person is mistreated anytime. And you got to guarantee that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help all of the time. And then you have justice. It doesn't exist anywhere in the known universe and never has in recorded history. But it's the goal that everybody should be putting their shoulder to the wheel every minute of the day, trying to produce that thing that has never been produced in recorded history. And you got to replace the system of white supremacy for sure in order to have that. That's got to go. That's got to go. It won't work because the system of white supremacy is designed to maintain non-justice in the most sophisticated way. It's designed to do that. So you can't have justice anywhere on the planet without getting rid of white supremacy first. That's the first order of business. And then you work on all the other forms of non-justice.
All right, Wendell, thank you for calling, and do not be a stranger, my brother. All right, thank you so much. Okay, let's see here. I think we're going to go to Lola. Yes, Lola, let me see if I can get you in here. Just bear with me here. Okay. Lola, got you on here. Good morning, and you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Greetings, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller. It's always an honor to speak with you, Mr. Fuller. I recently was in greater confinement for the first time. I was falsely accused for something. And it was 6 race soldiers that came to my home, and they were very hostile, intense. And I was afraid for my life. So now that I have to go to court, I'm just thinking about a lot, and I'm very emotional. And I don't want to go into their courtrooms overly emotional, but rather with logic and knowing that I am a victim and knowing that that is not in my control of how they view me and how they see me. So my question is, what is your advice to me as I enter into their courtrooms without being over emotional?
Well, just use logic. And before you answer any questions, first thing you do is think about what is being said. And you should have a lawyer if you don't think you can do any talking yourself. And your lawyer will determine whether or not you will say anything. if you're the person who's being put on trial. So that comes down to the skill of your lawyer.
Okay.
Whatever your lawyer says, you're just going to have to go with that. If you're a very emotional person, and even if you are not a very emotional person, that you know how to use logic, cause and effect, to think about what to say and what not to say. If you're not codified in any way, then knowing what to say and what to do in a court, that's where a code is supposed to work. But since you don't have time to get prepared for that, and you haven't studied the ways of codifying what you say, and particularly when it comes to answering questions, you probably will be stuck with just whatever your lawyer tells you to do and not do, and let your lawyer do the talking. Now, your lawyer may not be talking in such a way that works out in your favor, which means you are most likely to lose your case. That's the way it works. If you're not talking and the lawyer's doing the talking for you, it just depends on the skill of your lawyer against the skill of the person who is accusing you, if you're being accused. But I don't know all the details or any of the details of what you're talking about. So there's no way for me to guide you through that. But you cannot let your emotions govern what you say. You have to learn how to do logic. That's why we have this program. Because very few people are skilled at using logic. That's something you have to practice doing. Way before things happen. You have to practice over and over again. I have to do it so that you don't let your emotions get separated from logic. Once you do that, it's all over anyway. That's all I can tell you. That's the truth.
All right. Lola, thank you so much, dear, for calling in. And again, I don't have to tell you, but I'm going to say it anyway. Don't be a stranger. Thank you so much. Okay. There's some in the chat room, Mr. Fuller, that agree exactly what you said. Hire a lawyer. Say nothing. Let them answer for you is one of the comments that have come from the chat room. But speaking on comments, Mr. Fuller, it's 9:42 in the eastern part of the concept called the United States. And at this time, I'm going to have you talk about what we've been talking about in your book and the code. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, that's why we need a code, just like what the lady said. Just calling in, or emotions. She speaks and acts based on how she feels. But black people, all people in the known universe, need to have codification that makes us problem solvers, not problem makers. All people, white and non-white, ultimately, we should be universal people in tune with the very best that there is of the universe. Now, that's what the books that I have written is designed to help us do if we can latch on to it, and that means including myself, because what I put in the book, I have to consult my own book and try to practice what is written, because all it is supposed to be cause and effect. Always do the best thing rather than the worst thing. Always say words. Whatever you say, let it be the best thing that can ever be said by anybody anywhere. Now, that takes practice and a lot of it. But that's what these books are supposed to be designed to help us do, to think at that level all the time, not some of the time, all the time, every move we make. Ask ourselves the question, is this thing I'm fixing to do, is it constructive or non-constructive? Because there's no such thing as in between now. And that's something you have to really concentrate on. Everything that comes up, this thing I'm fixing to say, is it going to have a constructive effect or a non-constructive effect? And if it's going to have a non-constructive effect after you think about it, If it appears that way, don't do it. Because everything is about do's and don'ts.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is about do's and don'ts. But you can go to producejustice.com, and for the victims of white supremacy, which is what the books are addressed to, but they can be addressed to anybody who believes in justice, because that's what the books, there's no point in getting rid of white supremacy. You're going to still have non-justice and be satisfied with that. The whole point of getting rid of racism is to have justice, because justice is supposed to be better than racism. Why change from one set of nonsense and non-constructive activity to another set? That's just going around in a circle.
Yes, sir.
So these textbooks, go to producejustice.com, and that's supposed to eliminate letting your emotions govern you rather than logic. Because logic, when you use logic, it means always doing the most constructive thing and never doing anything that's non-constructive. How can you lose?
Okay. All righty. 516-453-9921 is the number to get in contact with the show. Or the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com is another way to get in contact with the show. I would advise you, though, that you call. Phone lines are open and you can get through. And some are just listening, and we thank you. The chat room is open, too, and we got it going on there. Going to the Gmails, this comes from Manifesting D. Says this, thank you, Mr. Bobby, and to elaborate, it was a time when if a white woman called the police or her white supremacy family members, the male would be lynched like Emmett Till. Now, you see these white women historically crying because she being arrested for making a false police report. In many of these cases, the white woman is clear as day on camera telling the individual, I'm going to tell them you hit me or you raped me. Is that part of the white code, and why doesn't it work anymore? Will technology be the fall of white supremacy?
Well, in answer to that last question, technology is, by the word technology, we just mean a way of getting things done. So you can use a way of getting things done in order to end white supremacy. The answer to that is yes. Just using words, that's a technology. And there's different devices that you can use to convey words. Just various inventions that have come up, like the camera. That's technology that you can use to reveal truth, because that's the way to go. The system of white supremacy is based on promoting non-truth in a very strategic manner all over the world, causing what? Confusion, because the white supremacists figured out a long time ago that the more confusion you cause among any people, the easier they are to dominate. Dominate by whom? By the person who is not confused. So they know how to do that. So yes, in answer to the question, the solution is technology. And the white supremacists themselves now, in little isolated instances like the one that was alluded to, where the white woman was caught on camera and she was saying what she was doing, confessing to what she was doing, really, giving evidence of what she's doing and recorded evidence. Now the white supremacists, seeing her situation, could sympathize with her, but she violated the white code. See, she's not supposed to do that according to the white code. She's not supposed to reveal what she's thinking. Just like in the movie Godfather, which I use as an example exhaustively sometimes. What did Don Corleone say to his son, Santino, when they were talking to Palazzo. He said, Santino, come here. You're getting soft in the head. I mean, with that karma, with that young girl. Never tell anybody outside the family what you're thinking. See, and so the system of white supremacy is a criminal enterprise, just like the Corleones in the movie The Godfather. All right? So she was violating the gang code, the family code. She's revealing, hey, I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, and I'm doing it right in your face and on camera, and everybody's going to know it because the camera's rolling. But I don't care. And she might have been doing it simply just out of arrogant emotions, which is why, hey, you don't let your emotions get wild, all right, because you can trap yourself. Now, what will the white supremacists likely do? They'll try to soft pedal it as much as they possibly can and stretch it out, but they might throw her under the bus. Now, the code book covers that. It comes under a strategy that they use. White sacrifice confusion. Now, the white supremacists sacrifice a few white people in order to pull, just like when you go fishing, you sacrifice a fish that you already have in order to do what? To catch more fish into your net. That's what the hook is for, all right? So every now and then, the white supremacists will put an unwary white person out there to do something that will cause what? A whole lot of confusion among the victims, and the victims wind up in a great big net by the millions because they sacrificed one.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. It's all about business. It's not personal. And they do the math. They're the greatest mathematicians in the world. And math is such a thing called political math, not just numerical math, social math. What is math? Cause and effect. You do something, you get a certain result. Everything, in a way of speaking, is mathematical. You do something, you get a certain result. The white supremacists want to always do something that makes the system of white supremacy stronger, no matter how it looks on the surface. Every black person should understand that. Watch that surface stuff. Think beyond what you just see on the surface. The white supremacists have depth, D-E-P-T-H, in everything that they do.
Alrighty. Okay. I was going to go to a Gmail, but we have a... Oh, okay, here we go. Okay. Let me do this here. Let's go to Richard. Okay, Richard from Texas. You are now on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question, and thank you for calling.
Thank you for taking my call. Good morning, gentlemen. I have two very brief, direct, I hope concise questions here, but I want to frame them in the context of military bearing, police bearing, which I'm sure Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. is familiar with. One of the first things that you learn when you get to basic training is not to ever get caught standing around with your hands in your pockets. And by the same token, I have never seen a police officer on duty in uniform standing around with his or her hands in their pockets. So my questions go to the murder of George Floyd and the image of the police officer kneeling on his neck. And everybody's seen it. Not everybody has seen it, but I know you have, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I'm sure everybody listening, a lot of the people listening have. And in that image, I don't know if anyone focused on the fact that the gentleman, the officer, had his left hand jammed into his trouser pocket. And I don't understand how anybody trying to subdue a suspect would put their hand in their pocket. My question is this: Did you ever notice it, Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.? And if you did, does it have any significance for you? And I'm going to be quiet and listen for a little bit, and then then you can disconnect me, Mr. Bobby, because otherwise I have to wait for the upload to hear the answer. Please.
Mind you, we only have about 4 minutes in this segment, so it's going to carry over. Mr. Fuller,
okay, that'll be fine.
Okay.
I've asked the question. I'll pick up the answer whenever I can get it. Thank you both. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fuller?
I saw that, and I have heard people, the caller said he didn't hear people talking about it, but quite a few people have talked about that, including people who are potential prosecutors. They have talked about it. I've seen them interviewed on television. I immediately saw it. I think everybody saw that, the hand in the pocket. That kind of sent a message. People kind of associate that, hands in pockets, with casualness. And so a lot of people used that word, said he was very casual about what he was doing. Laid back, like on vacation, and squeezing the life out of somebody. This has been mentioned over and over again, and I'm quite sure that tape is going to be played in the courtroom over and over again, and all these details are going to be mentioned, particularly the details of the hand in the pocket. Yes, that's going to be mentioned anyway, because I've heard it mentioned already. The lawyers have picked that up. They didn't miss that. I mean, any half-drunk lawyer would see that, all right? And so I don't think there'll be any problem with that hand in the pocket thing.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. What was your second question, Richard? That
was the second question.
Okay.
Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. indicated that he had seen the image, and he did have a reaction to it, and he just gave it, and I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for calling from Richard. And
thank you.
Again,
Bye-bye.
Like I tell everybody else, don't be a stranger. I know you won't, but I just say that. Thank you so much, brother.
Bye.
Okay. All righty. We have about 2 minutes in this segment, Mr. Fuller. KJ, I guess, was in the military, and he was addressing black people should limit non-constructive contact with those who practice white supremacy. He said he uses it daily, and many skills, most notably high discipline, as learned in the military. He says, can you elaborate further on the codified method of minimizing conflict by minimizing contact, please?
Yes, that's the essence of the code. One of the main things, we make contact with each other for no constructive reasons. Too much. In fact, any of it is too much. Anytime you make contact with anybody, it should be for a constructive reason. And that will take care of oceans of problems. We go seeking contact with other people. People like to make contact with other people. I mean, young people, even during this virus. I just got to get to the beach. I got to be around some people. I got to get around some, people that you don't even know or never will know, and you never even speak to them. But you just want to be around them. I got to get lost in the crowd, lost and found in the crowd. I find myself in the crowd. I don't know who I am unless I'm in a crowd. I don't know who I am or what I'm supposed to be doing or what my value is unless I'm in some type of tribal situation, unless I'm in some type of gang situation. I got to go join a gang. Well, you got to go and join a gang for what? For what? Is the gang paying you money to join? Do you ask yourself that? See, the code book that I have written, the main title is called The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Now, let's look at the second two words,
Mr.
United
Fuller.
Independent. Yes,
Mr. Fuller, may I interrupt you for a minute? I'll get in trouble for this from some people, but I have to break it so that we can go to the next hour, and be sure to pick it up
Yes, sir.
in the second hour. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Fuller. Okay, you've been listening to the first hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Stay tuned for the second hour coming up right now. Okay, welcome back to the second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. 516-453-9921 is the number that you can call to get in contact with the show, or you can email me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY at gmail.com. Okay, getting right back into it. Mr. Fuller, go ahead with that answer. That was you were getting ready to get into that.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Fuller.
The United Independent.
Mr. Fuller.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Fuller. Okay, there we go. Go ahead with that answer you were getting ready to give. It was very important.
Yes. United Independent. Now, why did I have this long title? Because these words mean nothing unless, like I said earlier in the earlier part of the program, words mean nothing until you make them mean something. They're just sounds, or they're just figures on a piece of paper. A lot of gibberish until you say what the words mean. Now, united in this context means you're not united with people. Black people need to get out of that thing of saying we got to have unity. I, as a black person, have to have unity with other black people. Now, but we don't explain what that means. What do you mean by unity? Well, coming together. Well, what do you mean by coming together? So we usually think of it as in a physical sense, and that's what we do. We gather in bunches. But the United Independent concept is, wait a minute, deal with this thing united. Do you unite with people? And if you do unite with people, how do you unite with people? Well, you just get together and get in the middle of the street and get us shoulder to shoulder, because that's how we usually do it. And we've been doing that like forever. That's not solving a problem. So what is it that you unite with in order to be united with people or with anything else? First thing you do, you unite with a concept, not with a person. We have missed that altogether. That's why we keep doing the same thing over and over again and get no constructive results. Because we think that unity means I look up and I see, since I'm black, I look up and see a whole ocean of other black people. And I go and join them. And we all walk in lockstep like soldiers. And we call that unity. That's not nothing but a whole bunch of people walking in lockstep. But you have to be in lockstep in your mind with a philosophy, a concept. That's why the last word in that main title is concept. And what is that concept? The concept of what you're trying to do. In other words, an idea. So you unite with an idea, and the idea unites the people. We have to understand that. Every college professor should be saying it just the way I just said it. You don't unite with people. You unite with a concept, and the concept unites the people. Because if all the people are going for the same concept, like a counter-racist code, if every black person adopts the code, that is the unity. Because people have asked me down through the years, well, Fuller, you've said all of this, and you've said all of that, and you're talking about this, and you're talking about that. Well, when do we get together? I say you got together when you get on the same page with a concept. What is a concept? A way of going about doing things. Things that you say, things that you don't say. Things that you do, things that you don't do. And if everybody is doing the same thing that same way and not doing other things, then that is the unity. Now you have the United Independent, but you're independent in that you make sure you're following the code. And what is a code? Like I've said before, like I've explained, like it's in the book. A code is just a way of getting things done. If everybody who is a carpenter follows the carpentry code, that's how the house goes up. Whether it's 2 people working on the house or 10 million, it's the same formula. Why? Because everybody looked at the same blueprint, even when they're alone. That's all a code is. Black people don't have anything like that. The white supremacists do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why one white supremacist can go into a black village and take it over. You can arrive at 9 o'clock in the morning and take that whole village over by 12. By conquest, most of the times, yes. I'll say some of the times in the modern day. But it's real skilled white supremacists? No. He came with a code. That's all he brought. He didn't bring any other weapon. But that code is a weapon. What is that code? A way for a white person who is a white supremacist to go about doing things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And KJ on the chat line just said this. He said you would understand this, Mr. Fuller. He said concerning the code, he says, and non-contact, he said, yes, I spent several years in the military. My first unit was a 155 Field Artillery Unit. I'm sure Mr. Fuller knows, as he has spent time in artillery, as I understand it. Is that true, Mr. Fuller?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You close that breech block, and when you sit down, you have that breech block in your hand. If it's a 105, it's a 155. That's kind of heavy for you. But
okay. Now, I wasn't in the military, so I have no idea what you guys are talking about, but he said you would know. Okay. Field Artillery Unit, evidently there was some shooting going on or getting ready to. All right. Thank you, KJ. And thank you, callers, for listening. 516-453-9921 if you have a question. Or you can Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. Okay. Alpha the First says this, Mr. Fuller. He says, recently, Mr. Fuller, a Chinese ambassador went to the Pacific Islands of Kiribati. When he arrived on the island, he was greeted with the local people offering their children as a living, quote, as a living walking rug or red carpet, end of quote. He walked on the backs and heads of the children with the parents watching and was greeted with a ceremony. Many black people in the concept called the United States are upset. They are calling the Chinese people, quote, the new white supremacists. This, end of quote, this statement is causing a lot of confusion. On page 8 in the revised expanded edition of the code talks about 3 types of people in the known universe. 2 questions. Where do Chinese people fit in this system of white supremacy? And number 2, what the white population is basically going extinct to all the data being released. If white people go extinct, can another group of people like the Chinese become white supremacists?
No, they can't become white supremacists. They'll still be Chinese, but they will aspire to be Chinese supremacists because that's what they say that they are trying to be. That's right in your face. They'll say that, no, we can't be white supremacists. I mean, we ain't white, okay? But we are going to have the Chinese way of doing things. And if they buy into the idea that we are going to be Chinese and all other people are not going to be Chinese, we're not going to make Chinese out of them, they're going to be subject to the Chinese, then it'll be just the same old what you call, quote, unquote, nationalism based on anything. You can make nationalism based on anything, your geography, You can say it's the height of people. You know, you can say that we are height nationalists. Okay? Well, what do you mean by height nationalist? That's a person that doesn't know what the person is talking about. So you ask a question. What do you mean by that, sir or ma'am? It means that you got to be 8 feet tall. You know, your body has to be 8 feet tall in order to be a member of this tribe or this nation or this club or this fraternity or this sorority. You got to be 8 feet tall. If you're not 8 foot tall, you're nothing. You're nobody. So that's always been around. That's been around among white people themselves. I mean, they call it royalism, okay? Everywhere that you have it, like among the African tribes, that royalty, talking about the king and the queen. Anytime you're talking about kings and queens, you're talking about somebody who lords it over everybody else, who dominate other people other than themselves, except what they want to do. So, yes, in answer to the question, the Chinese can say that, hey, that's what we're going to set out to do. We're not setting out to improve all humanity. We're setting out to make it a point that we are going to be conquerors in the old-fashioned way. I mean, you know, hey, Genghis Khan, all the rest of it. That's what we're going to recycle all of that stuff that we used to do. Okay, now they're going that way. None of these systems have produced a product called justice. So you oppose that like you oppose anything, because the whole idea of getting rid of racism is to replace it with a system of justice, which has never been done in recorded history. But black people, more than anybody, should be trying to do it, trying to do something that's never been done in recorded history. Never, no one has ever done it. And it looks like the Chinese, I mean, many of them strutting around in their suits and ties, they're following the format, many of them. I won't say that this is their overall plan of the white supremacists. Only thing about it, they're not saying that they're white supremacists because they're not white. But we're going to follow the same format that white people have had and non-white people have had like forever. Tribes all over Africa fighting, you know, the other tribe. Anybody who is not a member of my club, I'm going to fight them. I'm going to fight them. I'm going to stomp on them. I'm going to kill them. And I'm going to make them submit to my authority. And what's new about that? That's been going on like forever. That's what all of the people on the planet are very familiar with.
Okay. All righty. 516-453-9921 is the number to get in contact with the show. Make sure you press the number 1 button so you'll go to the top of the line. And, of course, in Gmail, the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. Let's go to the Gmails, as a matter of fact. This is from John, Mr. Fuller. He says this. On July the 14th, 2020, there's a video called, quote, "They have a code, that's why they're successful," end of quote. Mr. Fuller was accurate in his assessment regarding the white male anus replacing the black female vagina. On the Pornhub website, 2 channels, one entitled Blacks on Boys, the other Thug Hunter, end of quote, depicts sexual deviant behavior that is geared to steer non-white males toward white males, just providing proof to Mr. Fuller's claim. Thank you. Mr. Fuller, I've never been on those sites, but, and matter of fact, didn't know anything about them, but this person, John, was agreeing with your assessment when you just speak about the white male's anus becoming the female vagina. A lot of people do not like that, Mr. Fuller. Don't even like for you to say that. I get a lot of Gmails concerning that. Why is that, Mr. Fuller? Or why do you think that is?
I don't know. They can say why they don't like it. People should. If people don't like, if I don't like something, I'll tell you why I don't like it. You know, but I do say this: something is either true or false. Period. Now that's what I see. That's the way I see it going. They got every type of advertisement that's pumping it up.
Mm-hmm.
Mass sexual confusion. I have it in the textbook and I stick by it. That's a part of the white supremacist agenda. Sexual confusion among their victims. Why? Because if they can confuse black people, the non-white people of this planet, sexually, it'll be a piece of cake to confuse them in all the other areas of activity. There are 9 areas of activity which are listed in the textbook, all through the textbook, over and over again. Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And everybody on the planet is either directly or indirectly engaged in one or more of those activities 24/7. Everybody on the planet. The white supremacists have said we are going to control all of the areas of activity, economics through war, when it comes to non-white people. And one thing that we're definitely going to center on in all of those 9 areas is the area of sex. And we are going to confuse them, starting with the first area, economics, and the educational systems we set up for them is going to confuse them. The entertainment that they do is going to be just all over the place, and we're going to call it entertainment, but it's not going to be constructive entertainment. They're not going to get anything constructive. It's going to be non-constructive when it comes to the non-white people. And then that 8th area of activity, sex, we are going to confuse them in every possible way we can. We're going to tell them that if you got a male, you're looking at a male baby. That shouldn't be a male baby. That should be a female baby. And if you got a female baby, that shouldn't be a female baby. That should be a male baby. And they wink at each other and say, you think they'll go for this? Say, sure. All you got to do is just keep saying it over and over. That's been proven down through history. You keep saying something over and over and over and over again. Pretty soon, the people who are listening, they'll get groggy. And they'll actually believe what you're saying, even though you're not making any kind of sense at all. Why change a male baby and make it into a female baby when you already got female babies and you already got male babies? Why not just leave it like that? Is that an improvement? That's the question. Yes, you can do these things, but is it an improvement? And if it is an improvement, how? Is anybody asking these questions? You know, trans this and trans that. What are you tranning for? Well, it's an improvement. Okay, you say it's an improvement. It's an alternative. An alternative to what? For what? In order to achieve what? Are any of the scholars asking these questions in classrooms? What are you trying to achieve? And who came up with this idea? And who are the people who are pushing it more than anybody? And when you look around for who is putting it all over the world among non-white people, it's the usual suspects, the white supremacists.
Mm-hmm.
The evidence shows this.
Okay, moving along here. And speaking about that, I was asking Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, have you seen the Cardi B video? And I'm gonna give just the letters of it. WAP. Have you seen that video yet?
No.
Okay, no.
What does it consist of? Oh, well, no. I can't ask the question. I could.
It's explicit. It's explicit. That's why I wondered if you had seen it, because somebody did ask a question about that, but I didn't want to put that on the air that way. But
Well,
anyway,
it's okay. I mean, anything that's happening on the planet, I think, should be revealed. If it's happening.
I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm allowed to use that certain words, what that WAP stands for on this particular platform. I'll have to ask.
That's the problem. You're correct.
Yeah, I'll have to ask if I could use that particular.
No,
word.
we can't. We don't. Certain
Okay,
things
all right.
that are not proper. But maybe somebody will tell somebody who will tell somebody what that means. Because we've said all through this program, words don't mean anything until somebody explains what they are.
Well, a couple of our listeners, your listeners and my listeners, or our listeners, have sent me the video of that particular thing. Cardi B and Megan the God, the Thee, the Stallion, Megan the Stallion. And anyway, I did view it and still discussing that in my...
Was it non-white people in that video?
No. These were two sisters doing some.
Well, wait a minute.
Things.
Are they two sisters? Are they non-white sisters? Non-white.
No, they're black sisters. They're they're non-white. Yes, they're non-white. Yes.
And they are doing something that is most people would consider to be, well, I don't know, constructive, non-constructive, what?
Well, there are probably some that don't see anything the matter with it. There are some that will probably would be offended by it. It's up for grabs. I just wanted to study it because it was sent to me by a few of our listeners because I hadn't seen it before, and I did ask around, well, what is the meaning of this? And the images that were portrayed in it, it was something. If somebody can let you see that, I would be interested in what you thought as well as the callers would be. Anyway, let me move on here. Brother Lush has sent me a Gmail, Mr. Fuller, concerning something that you had written. It was called How Racism Got Started, and I did look at a little bit of it. It's on YouTube. So any of you out there who want to know how racism got started, just YouTube Neely Fuller, How Racism Got Started, and you'll see. He says it was a very interesting piece. So thank you, Brother Lush, for your comment. Okay, let me see here. The number is 516-453-9921 if you would like to get in contact with the show, or 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. This comes from the concept of South Africa about confusion. Greeting, Mr. Fuller. In the so-called South Africa, there is a group calling itself Colored Lives Matter. These are people of color who look just like us, so-called black people. However, they see themselves as different from us. Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr., where did the term colored come from when white supremacists use it on black people in so-called America? Can you explain what you know about being used as buffers in the system of white supremacy, please? And thank you very much.
Yes. Just think of white supremacy as organized crime. The most successful organized criminal organization in recorded history. And in capital letters, it's called the system of white supremacy. And it's a criminal enterprise. So if you study any gangster movies, the Corleones, the Sopranos, Al Capone, the Carpus brothers, whomever, particularly the big-time gangsters, as they call them, Al Capones of the world. The system of white supremacy operates the same way. It's a business, all right, and it's a bloody business, and they worship it as a bloody business. So, yes, in any gangster operation, they have what you call buffers, like you saw in the movie, particularly I think Godfather 2. There's a court scene, where a person who was named, first name was Willie, and he was in the Corleone family gangster enterprise, and they had a falling out somewhere along the line, or a misunderstanding. I think it was a misunderstanding. And the question was asked, said, well, did you ever talk to Don Corleone directly? And he said, no, I never talked to him. He said, but you're a hitman, but you never talked to your boss. He said, no, I never talked to him about making a hit on anybody. All right. And he never talked to me, you know. Mm-hmm. He said, in other words, you always had a lot of buffers between you and the people who were at your top, who you got your orders from. You never talked to the top people, but you talked to a whole lot of people in between. He said, oh, yeah. He started laughing. He said, yeah, the Corleones had lots of buffers. All right. So you can use that analogy. You can look at that movie, and you can understand the white supremacists being supreme. They'll just say, hey, we're going to have another classification of people here. And say, well, why are you going to have that in their business proposal? See, they make out a business plan. White supremacists are business. When they sit around and say what their business techniques are going to be, say, well, we're going to take a group of black people and we're going to use them as buffers between us and other black people, so that those black people who are going to be the recipients of mistreatment by our buffers, they will be distracted and spend all their time trying to get rid of the buffers. Therefore, we don't have to be bothered with them on a day-to-day basis. And the white supremacists do that everywhere. Mm-hmm. And they make sure there's plenty of buffers.
Nope.
All right.
Okay.
I mean, that is not a new technique. And they'll do it any kind of way. They'll put, they put other black people up front. The code book covers that. It's called showcasing. Racial showcasing. Okay. Racial showcasing confusion. That's one of their strategies.
Mm-hmm. All righty. A word to my producers. When Mr. Fuller is speaking with me, and also with me in particular, he's going in and out. I know that's not your fault. I'm going to say the usual suspects are trying something, so I may not hear all of what Mr. Fuller is saying. So that's to my technicians. See if they can identify what the problem is. Okay, here. I tell you what.
Is the audience hearing?
The audience is hearing, but sometimes when you're speaking and answering, I can't hear all of your comment. It's in and out.
I see.
Yeah. But anyway, let me do this. You're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I'm the co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show and to call in, you can do this number, 516-453-9921. Be sure to press the number 1 button, and you'll go to the top of the line. If not, you can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. I will try to get to your Gmail at some point. It probably will not be today, and hopefully I will get to it before it's automatically deleted. I won't delete it, but it may be automatically deleted. I don't want that to happen. But we'll try and do our very best. But that's the number you call to get into the show. The phone lines are open. 516-453-9921. Press the number 1 button. Give the call screener your name so that we can proceed. Okay. Here in the last half hour, this comes from Mixed Herbs, Mr. Fuller, from the Gmail. It says, Mr. Fuller, you mentioned that white supremacy is worldwide. Do you think that the United States is the hub where most white supremacy set up shop and dominate more? Because countries in Africa, blacks control and own more, appears to allow for less domination than how it is in the U.S.
The white supremacists are white supremacists, and they dominate everybody who's classified as non-white. That's why the whole world's all messed up, because that's a criminal enterprise, and we are all part of that criminal enterprise. Black people are prisoners of war. So if you think of a prison, anybody who is familiar with how a prison operates, you got the picture of the entire world. And you have, in a prison, you got prison masters and you have prisoners. Prisoners and prison masters. If you're classified as white, you are a prison master. You're born into that system. And if you're classified as non-white, black, brown, red, yellow, tan, beige, you are a prisoner of war. And a prisoner master does things, all kinds of things. If you just study how a prison is structured, they come around and they pick out certain people to work in the warden's office, and they're considered favorites. See, here you got your buffers again, okay? And they have what you call trustees. You have a hierarchy because the prison masters set it all up. And you have a smooth-running prison. And the prisoners, regardless of what they do or how smart they are and all like that, that doesn't count for anything because it's all feeding into the prison system. So that's all. When people get confused about the world that they're in, just think of we're in the system of white supremacy. That's the only government on the planet. Mm-hmm. And it's located everywhere. Everywhere you see a white person who is a white supremacist, that is the government, regardless of how it appears on the surface. And it doesn't make any difference about the numbers or where they are located. White supremacists don't have borders. Borders are made for the non-white people, just like in a prison. The warden of the prison, the masters of the prison, go everywhere. The prisoners can only go where they are sent or allowed to go. So we can't get confused about these so-called countries. There's no such thing as countries to a white supremacist. They're just areas of the prison, which they dominate everywhere, every inch. The bottom of the ocean, they are in charge of all of it. When it comes to what? When it comes to people of color. Mm-hmm. All of it. There's no such thing as a non-white person who is the boss of anything, no matter how it looks on the surface. That black person who is the president of a so-called country has to answer to the white supremacists if he's anywhere on this planet called Earth, any time of day or night. Or if it's a lady, a queen, a black queen of a tribe, or of a so-called country. She's not in charge of anything. It seems that way. And proof of it is, when the white supremacists come around, she had better do what they say do. Mm-hmm. Well, she's not going to be queen of anything, because she's only queen in name anyway. She's queen to her so-called subjects. Why? Because the white supremacist says that she is. They're the ones who make people queens and kings.
Yes.
Or allow them to be that if they achieve that among their group. But when the white supremacists come around, those black people, regardless of who they are to their people, they are nothing to the white supremacists.
Yes,
and they'll get stomped on in 5 minutes if anybody questions it.
All righty. Gmail from, this is from Reginald Briscoe, or Reggie, as he has said. He says, good morning, Mr. Fuller. He says, I appreciate the radio show and the work that you are doing to help us blacks to first understand and then counter white supremacy. So thank you, Reggie, for that. Here's another Gmail. This comes from William. He says this, Mr. Fuller. He says, a new book has just been published by a non-white victim on the subject of caste, C-A-S-T-E, as it is used regarding Hindus from India. The premise is that the concept of caste may be just as important as race. Mr. Fuller, what are your thoughts on the word caste?
Same thing. Racism is a caste system. It's just a matter of use of words. Caste just means a hierarchy. Now, you can have a hierarchy. You have a hierarchy in any family. You got a father, a mother, who tell the children what to do. That's a caste system. But it's how the castes are employed. That's where the real questions come in about whether or not it's constructive or non-constructive. So, you look at the so-called caste system in India, that's just a bunch of non-white people, for the most part, dominating other non-white people and calling them Dalits, or I think that's how you pronounce it, or untouchables. And it follows the same format as the system of white supremacy. Based on what? If it does follow that format, are these people being mistreated? Do they get the help that they need? Just like, that's the concept of justice. Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated. And guaranteeing, underline, guarantee, the person that needs help the most constructive help. So you look at the people who are in that caste called untouchables and say, are they being mistreated? And the answer is yes, according to everything that I've heard. And are they getting the help, the most constructive help that people can get? The answer is no. So mistreatment of any kind here in 2020 should be gotten rid of, regardless of where it is. But the caste system called racism is the most powerful. And racism is what, by definition? White supremacy. Why? Because they're the smartest and most powerful people on the planet. So you always check the most powerful people first. You check them out to see if they are practicing what? Justice. And the white supremacists are dedicated to not practicing justice. That's why you can't get rid of the caste system in India, or this thing that they say, people are reporting, that the Chinese, many of them, maybe not all, I don't know all the details, but we will know by their conduct what the Chinese are doing in Africa. And if they're doing the same old thing that they themselves protested against for many years, there used to be an expression called ain't got a Chinaman's chance that the white supremacists use. So if they're copying off of the same format of the white supremacists, that is non-justice. The whole idea of everything is to get rid of non-justice once and for all everywhere on the planet. That should be everybody's reason for breathing. And we don't cut anybody any slack on that. And the first order of business, though, you've got to get rid of the system of white supremacy, because they are allowing all of this. When you're running the prison, you are to blame for anything that goes wrong in that prison. A prison is set up like a ship. The captain of the ship is always to blame for what happens on that ship. Or, if he or she is doing the correct thing, getting the credit. You get credit for what you do, for what they do on that ship. That's why they call it the good ship. Why? That's a good ship. Why? Because everything runs smoothly. Nobody's being mistreated. All right? But now if you got a captain like in the novel, Jack London's novel, The Sea Wolf, the sailors are being mistreated, Nobody's getting the proper nourishment and whatnot, or like Captain Bligh of the English Navy back in the old days. They had a book put out and a movie called Mutiny on the Bounty. Why did the sailors mutiny? Because they were being mistreated, they thought, in their minds.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's just all about mistreatment. That's what getting rid of racism is about. It's not about glorifying black people. It's about getting rid of mistreatment. We should focus on that worldwide. And the untouchables in India, are they being mistreated? That's the only question. And if you are, I don't care who you are. You can say that you're the leader of India and all that. Yeah. Are you mistreating anybody? Sir, ma'am, you have anybody here who's being mistreated? Anybody, any one person that's being mistreated? Well, you need to get your act together, sir or ma'am. That's it.
Okay. I don't have a name here, so let me do the best I can here. Let me see here. Buffering here. Okay, I don't have your name, but you're in the 252 area. You're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please, with your question.
Good morning. This is James.
Hey, James. Yeah, your name didn't come up, but yeah, thank you for calling last week. Sorry we couldn't get to you, but you're not a stranger. Go ahead, James.
I have a question for Mr. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, for the benefit of the listening audience, would you describe what you may have experienced or what you may have considered to help you to understand that white supremacy is like a prison system? I've never heard anybody explain it like that, and I've never read it in a textbook or anything like that helped me to understand it.
Well, I have done it on this program, but I'll do it again. If you understand, that's why I tell people, just look at the movie Shawshank Redemption, and you get an idea of something a person has never heard of a prison. You might get an idea of how a prison system may run, or you can look at a movie called Schindler's List, and it talks about World War II and the Nazis, and they had places called concentration camps. And you just look at how the prison masters operate and what the prisoners have to go through. You get an idea. If you've never been in a jail or don't have 10 folks who's ever been in a jail, the system of white supremacy just operates on the same principle as a prison system. And all of the black people, all of the people who are of color on this planet called Earth, were born into that system called the system of white supremacy. That's the name of the prison. And your skin color is your prison uniform. Prisoners usually have special uniforms to identify them as prisoners. That's what black people have to understand, particularly black males. When the prison masters, particularly those who wear badges and guns, not saying anything against law enforcement now. I want to go on record as saying that. No. There's no such thing as a police officer brutalizing anybody or doing anything that a police officer is not supposed to do. Because the minute a person does something that a police officer is not supposed to do, according to the code, that person has resigned from the police force. The minute he does one thing that he's not sworn to do and not supposed to do. That's the definition of a police officer. A police officer always does the correct thing. And the minute that person who is called a police officer does one thing that he's not supposed to do, which means something non-constructive, that person is no longer a police officer. That person is just another person mistreating somebody. But you can't call that person a police officer. That's an insult to everybody who is a police officer, if there is such a person. because a police officer always does the correct thing. And the minute that he or she does not do the correct thing, does not do the thing that leads to the production of justice in the best possible way that they can, they have relinquished that title, even though they might still have that uniform on. That's not the way you look at that person. Now, the entire system of white supremacy is a thug operation. And everybody who is non-white born into that prison system called the system of white supremacy is subject to that thug operation. The whole world is under thug domination in the form of racist man and racist woman, the white supremacists collectively. That's the statement on that. That's the codified statement. We're all born in prison if you have color in your skin. And if you just study how a prison is run, expect to be killed. Expect to be anything unpleasant anytime, because that's where a prison is.
Wow. All right, James. Thank you for your call, and thank you for remembering to call in from last week. And again, don't be a stranger. Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Fuller, we got about 14 minutes left in this hour, and it is time that we speak about your book. So take it away, Mr. Fuller.
Yes. All of the things that we're discussing now, there are quite a bit of it is covered in the textbook for victims of white supremacy. And it's got 3 titles. I started off with just 1, but I wound up with 3 because I tried to be as explicit as I possibly can, because the main title is something that would have to be explained in detail, which it is explained in detail in the book itself. It's called the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Now, that's a bunch of 2-cent words that don't mean anything until they're explained. So I tried to, on the cover of the book, say a little bit more that's more explicit by saying a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of white supremacy. And white supremacy is racism, and racism is white supremacy. There's no other form of racism other than white supremacy. Okay? Can't have 2 supremes in the same space. And what to do about it, that's what the books are for. And what the individual, not for the person next door down the street, for the individual victim to practice doing and saying, because all problems are solved by what you do and what you say. That applies to everybody. And so this book is supposed to be designed to help the individual black person know what to do and what to say and what to not do and what to not say in every situation, all the 9 areas of activity. That's what the book is designed to do. A textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of white supremacy. You can get it by going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. Producejustice.com. And see what you think.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Okay. This Gmail comes from Aroku. It says this: Greetings, Mr. Fuller. It says, I'm contacting you for 2 constructive reasons. Number 1, I would like to submit my deliberate appreciation for your thoughts and concepts and your ability to provide constructive and concise done. What needs done is replacing the system of white supremacy, racism, with a system of justice. I'm still learning, and I am still learning. What I am listening for and still learning, being a problem solver for everything area of activity to get constructive and just results. Gratitude. Second is a suggestion, Mr. Fuller. Suggestion is a form of constructive criticism as far as the code is concerned, to get constructive answers and find a practice the most constructive answer. That suggestion is, Mr. Bobby, perhaps an audible sound is a better provision to help Mr. Fuller adjust to the time limit. Unfortunately and unintentionally, the current system provides interruption and confusion. Respectfully, Aruku. On the first question, he's given thanks for what you have been shown him or taught him, or the book, I guess, would be more appropriate, and he's appreciative of this. Now, I'm not aware of this provision in the second one, an audible sound is better as a better provision to help you just to the time limit. I guess sometimes when I have to interrupt you or whatever, if you had a piece or something that could tell you the time, it would be better so that the questions wouldn't be you wouldn't be interrupted. I guess that's what the person is speaking about. He says unintentionally, the current system provides interruption and sometimes confusion, because I know I don't want to interrupt you when you're speaking, but because you may not have a clock or whatever in front of you, and we're not synced up together because you and I do not speak prior to the show, so sometimes that can be a little confusing. Do you have any suggestion on that, Mr. Fuller?
No, but everything that people do should be codified, so if anybody can come up with a way of doing it and a better way, everybody should be all ears. I know I am.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anything that will improve anything. That's the whole idea of a codification. You steadily improve. So the person who is bringing it up, if they can think of something, or if they knew somebody who does it, you know, in the way that the caller says should be done, we can look into that. Yes, always keep moving. Keep looking for a better way to do everything. It's called the refinement. You know, once you start doing something, building a house, I mean, then you look around and say, now I got the house built. Well, maybe another coat of paint will help it. I mean, and maybe we need to put some caulk around those windows because a lot of the heat goes out in the winter, and we're losing money doing that, and we're not keeping warm. So we need to do something with these windows. You do that with everything. You try to improve. So anybody who can come up with an idea to improve anything, no matter how small, if it can be done, we'll try to find a way to do it. That's the next order of codification. Always try to improve everything. But right now I can't think of anything because, I don't have a lot of practice at what you call the tech. I'm not computer savvy or none of that, and I'm certainly not an organization person. I would be better organized. I mean, I need a lot of skills when it comes to organization.
Oh, okay. All righty. Let's see here. Oh, we have a call. Okay, I'm sorry. Good thing I looked up. Okay, wait a minute. Let me get this. We're going to get Stephen here. Almost missed you there, Stephen. Good morning and welcome to the show. What is your question for Mr. Fuller, Stephen?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller, Jr. My question is, are we non-white at war with racism, white supremacy, and at war with non-whites ourselves?
Oh, we're really not at war with the white supremacists. Or if we were serious about that, this thing would have been over a long time ago. Black people concentrate mostly on each other, which is why we are at war most of the time with each other. I mean, this is the minor war inside of the bigger war, which is the war by the white supremacists against their victims. Because racism is war, and we are prisoners of war. And the prisoners most of the time do fight among themselves. Go into any prison, that's what you find most of the prisoners doing, comparing themselves with each other, and then finding an excuse to fight each other from cell block to cell block, all this type of thing. And in the greater prison, called the system of white supremacy, we follow the same format. Prisoners looking for newer and better ways to fight each other. That's what we do. And so in answer to the question, yes, that's what we do. Rather than trying to figure out how to dismantle that prison, which we are prisoners of war, and then in that process replace it with a system of justice, and then only then will the war be over. And we will no longer be prisoners of war, and it won't be any war. And it won't be any war prisoners, because everybody will be practicing justice. That's the goal. But
yes, sir.
The wardens of this prison, the white supremacists, they keep the prisoners fighting among themselves. They put drugs among us and whatnot and have us killing each other over that. And then we get to the place we kill so much, we kill about nothing at all. Just kill, because that's all we know when we interact with each other. That's why we need a code to keep us away from each other unless we have something constructive to do or say. That's one of the first things in the code we have to learn to do. Don't make contact. Where there's no contact, there's no conflict, unless you have something constructive to say or do. And that should apply to every prisoner of war, every non-white person on the planet. Constructive. 24/7 every day. Constructive activity. Never anything non-constructive.
All righty. Okay.
One other question, if it's possible, Mr. Bobby?
Yeah, you got about a minute. Go ahead, Stephen.
Okay. So the way to replace racism, white supremacy with justice would be to replace it from our minds and from our daily lives. Is that the way?
Yes. In answer to the question, since we have such brief time, yes. Everything, remember, I've been saying it all during this program and all other programs. Constructive and non-constructive. How do you determine how to do something constructive rather than something non-constructive? It's in the mind. Everything starts with how you think. That's why the textbook for victims says what? Textbook, workbook for what? Thought, then speech, then action. That's the sequence.
Okay.
Always think about something, and then speak about it, and then do the thing that you're thinking about, and making sure that what you do is constructive.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, Stephen. Thank you again, and don't be a stranger. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. And Akuru said this, Mr. Fuller, and he responded back. He said the thing that we could use as an audible sound would be a bell, a ringtone, or a buzzer. He said that was the idea behind it. So let's see if we can work that in. If that is to be done, I'll talk to the producers about that and see if that can be worked in. But thank you, Mr. Fuller. Again, thank you, callers. This has been the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and Mr. Bobby as co-host. Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
And now thanks to everybody.
All right.